250,000 layoffs last year. Just like system tech. It used to be like this guaranteed, like you get like a guaranteed good job, and now it's just like, why not?
Do you know how startups are?
I mean, startups, they're always usually better with like pay and stuff, but it's like always like unstable and stuff. Like you might not have a job in like a month or something. I might try doing this too, but yeah. What are you planning to do?
I'm planning to go into academia.
Oh, do you want to be a professor? Okay. I'm like sitting at 2 now.
Start a PhD.
What?
Last week I used to start a PhD.
Oh, yeah.
Like a senior specialty in cooling side.
Being a professor sounds. I think I would consider that as a possibility.
I also have one of the jobs which is going because of this.
What?
Because of recession, they introduced this content instructor.
Oh, yeah. Where you don't have to have a PhD or something. Yeah.
You just go and start off from basic.
Okay, that's nice. Yeah, so that could be an option. Although the pay is not great.
That's true. I have to work 2-3 jobs. Suppose you work 3 hours every day, 4 hours somewhere else.
I mean, I could do that too. Yeah, I mean, I could do like freelancing or something like that, or yeah, or like work multiple jobs too. I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna have too much debt after college is over, so I'm not like too pressured to get a job right now.
Yeah, that's really the best.
It's really nice. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm really like worried about like having a job in the future, or like, because I also want to do like game development too, and that's like even worse industry.
Yeah, that's true. Games is gonna be here. That is a good market that I'm going to be looking for.
I'm just gonna get to the semester, that's it.
Okay, any questions? We'll proceed. Perfect. What are we doing today? Very bit of JavaScript, very little. Few touching a bit on JavaScript, talking more about rotation and transformation that we spoke a lot about and we'll speak a bit more, and start to pave the way. I'll show you how I think it's a good idea to make homework 1, if you are grad or undergrad and want a bonus of the rotation. Then what I'll try to present as a systematic way that I think it's a bit tedious, but maybe is a good idea, especially when we move to 3D. And then probably start talking about the mathematical tool or the tool in general, or for homework 2. Homework 2, which was in previous semesters, homework 3, and I skipped homework 2 now, is about generating a scene from billboard, from images that you're hanging around in 3D, and then you're getting a camera and camera parameters and want to show what the camera see in the 3D world. And in homework 4, we will introduce the same graphical scene, but there will be sun, so it's not the same graphical scene, but we'll add the sun, and we'll add all the shading effects on surfaces, and we'll add mirrors. Furthermore, that will mean that our ray tracing or shading and shadows, that means that ray tracing cannot just stop when we hit an object, but we want to see this object that my ray just hit, is this exposed to the sun or not, and if yes, then at which angle it creates, which is very much with like issues of the shading. So I think that as opposed to homework 1, homework 2 is quite exciting. But furthermore, let's talk about rotational matrix. So I can, we talk about rotational matrix as here is a formula, cosine minus sine, sine minus cosine. We talked about it that we in homogeneous coordinates, we just take the main block and add 1 at the corner because we need now 3 by 3 matrices, or in 3D it would be 4 by 4. And we connect it to complex numbers. And now I want to connect it to a more inherent topic in algebra called switching bases and switching coordinate systems. And it's a bit tedious and overkilling in 2D, but will make life much easier in 3D. So it's okay. So basics. I have a set of vectors in some high dimension, and I look at these 2, 3 vectors, and I want to ask what are all the other vectors that I can take by linear combination of these vectors v1, v2, v3, dot, 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 to make bring it all to place to our safe place. In the 2-dimensional plane, here is a vector x, which we can write as 0, 1. Here is a vector y that I can write as 0, 1 and 1, 0. And these 2 vectors form a basis that spans the whiteboard. Except that is every other point on the whiteboard I can write as a convex combination, but that's by itself is not guaranteed to make convex combination to make the vectors a basis. Let's add v over here. Then now if I look at x, y, and v, I can also write every point in the plane as a combination, linear combination of these 3 vectors. But now I have more than one way to do it. I can write it in a few ways, because I can write it using only v. For example, I want to represent the point P. I can use either your y and v, or v and x, or all 3 of them, and write P as different combination of these vectors. So they are not as skinny, as inherent as it can be. So to be a basis, it needs to be a unique way to write every such vector. I assume that I'm just reminding you, because if that's the only place you are exposed to basis in linear algebra, you're in a really bad shape. Like, you're very unlucky that I'm your teacher to teach you. Yeah, it takes much more time to get it under control, but hopefully, if you just need a reminder, you did. So, let's take a matrix M and think about it as a linear operation. It takes a point, or vector, 0, and to be a linear operation, it must take 0 to 0. So I just multiply and sum, so if all zeros doesn't matter. It needs to be linear operation, so m times any 2 vertices, u and v, is just m times un plus m times v. That's the other condition for linear operation. And multiplication by a constant. If I have the vector u, multiply by 3, m times, or m operated on 3 times u is just like 3 times m operated on u. Another way, linear operation. And that's all makes linear operations. Let's put it all together. Here are my 2 favorite, vector x and y, as usual. And I think about the vector x as, hey, it's a direction that if you're getting 1x, it tells you go east by 1 meter. 2x will mean go east by 1 meter and then go east another meter. X plus y would be first go to the east and then go to the y, go to the north 1 meter as well. Okay, doesn't tell you anything exciting so far. But then, if I have a point or a vector v, and I'm making a salad between the points and the vector, if I have such a point 2, 3, I can think about it as v expressed as some constant, 2 times x, plus the other combination, 3 times y. Yeah. That's just how I represent x and y. How is this all related to these linear transformations? So, if I think about the vector, let's ignore the angle. So I just have x and y. And as we said, I have the point 4, 2, readable, barely. Readable, the 4, 2, the font, but not. Readable. So, how can I understand 4, 2? Well, I can understand it, as we said, 4, 2 is just is 4 times x plus 2 times y. And if you think about the x and y as walking direction, where to go, it tells you go to the x direction 4 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then continue in the y direction another 2 units. That's 4 times x. If you start from 0, 0, go in the x is 4 units and 3 units. Okay, and now thinking about these two vectors as speaking there as a direction, navigation direction, what happens if I have a rotational matrix? I have a rotational matrix that takes the point P for x plus 4y and will move it into some other points. And how can I think about these other points that it will move? The new points that P will move to. So the question will be, let's ask the vector x itself, what happened to the vector x when I'm doing the rotation? It goes to some other points because I'm rotating the whole world. So x will, the point 1, 0, will go to a new point whose coordinates are cosine x and sinus x. And the vector y will go into a new point whose coordinates are, what is the x coordinate? The x is minus sinus. If the length is 1, it's all up here. So the new y, the new x prime, is cosine t and sinus t. And for the y, the x coordinate, it was just 1. Remember, it's just this piece. This is exactly this piece. Just now it's in negative, minus c and cosine t. Now I want to think about another way to, absolutely, thanks. Maybe I just, I have the feeling that I'm going to be very embarrassed very soon. You're saying that it was fixed because it did not react to the remote.
The remote's dead.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it's not coming on.
having trouble with that remote, so it's rebooting. Give me a second.
That's unfair. Meantime, let's think about another way to think about matrix multiplication. I have alpha, beta, gamma, delta matrix with two parameters times x, y, and when I introduce, that you are in the room wanted ever talk about it, when I introduce multiplying this matrix by this vector, I said, think about this matrix as take the first row, do dot product with xy, take the second row, do dot product with xy. And that's absolutely fine, except that now I want to show you another way to think about it. I will not think about it as two rows. I will think about it as two columns. C1 and C2, the very same matrix. Oh,
It's working.
thanks. Let's see if I can actually massage the OBS. No, I won't switch, but I want to edit at least.
It's one of those, yeah.
Yeah. Coming.
That's the other one. Yeah, the top one there. It should be that one there.
Yeah. Thanks.
And now that should be able to move around as well if you need it as well. So, okay.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to think about multiplying this matrix, for example, rotational matrix by the vector xy, but how would I think about it? Look at these two columns, C1 and C2, and you are creating now the vector C1 multiplied by a scalar x plus the vector C2 multiplied by the scalar y. For example, if this is a x vector, x, 1, 0, this is a y vector, 0, 1, this is the y vector multiplied by x, y. That's, by the way, the identity matrix, as you probably noticed, but pretend that you don't know when I multiply by the vector x, vector y. What happens? I get x 1, 0 plus y 0, 1, which is just x, y. But now I want to convince you that if we want a rotational matrix, all I need to ask is what happened to the x vector under the rotational matrix? And that will be cool in 2D and mostly in 3D. So what happens to the vector x after the rotation? The vector x becomes cosine sine. The vector y, that's called x prime. The vector y become minus sine and cosine. What happened with our navigation direction when I'm going from S further? Well, beforehand we said I only use the x coordinate, the normal x and y, so I'll get to this point P at the end. How can I think about the rotation? Rotation can be, instead of x, use x prime. Instead of y, use y prime. Just rotate the coordinate system. And now in the new coordinate system, goes 4 units times 4 units in the x prime direction, and go 2 units in the y prime direction. That is use the same vector for 2, but not on the identity matrix, but on the matrix that I got by write the x, where does x go to? X prime, this guy, times minus y, which is the y coordinate. This is just y prime. This column is just one y prime. Because you need a rotational matrix and you don't want to remember cosine, sine, etc. Just express how each vector looks like in the old coordinate system, but are the x, y, z. And if we're already here, let's mention, let's double check. So where does this matrix R, which was cosine minus sine, sine and cosine, double check. Where does it take the x vector? Where does it take the x vector? If I apply it on this vector, maybe I think about it as an operator that takes one direction and spits out another direction. What do I expect this direction to be? If the input is the x vector, you need to get x prime as a return. This is exactly what happened, because that would be the output that you get. And if you enter the y vector, y01, times the same matrix, what are we getting? 0 times cosine plus minus sine, and 0 cosine, which is exactly the y part. So it takes x and y. And let's play with it a bit more. We expect that rotational matrix will have an inverse because it's 1-to-1, most 1-to-1 and they have inverse, but this one has a very cool part of an inverse. So here I wrote x and y as two, I wrote x prime and y prime as two columns. Let's write R, since I pretend that we don't know, let's write it as x prime and y prime, but I'll make a column, I'll make a row out of them. The same cosine sine as before, but now I'm making a row out of them instead. That is, here they were column, and now I'm making rows out of them. Where does this matrix send x? So, and that's x prime here, that's a prime, that I wrote, the x prime and y prime after the rotation. Take x prime, take y prime. Take x prime and think about it as an operation, this new operation. Remember, this is not R, this is, to be precise, R transpose. I call reflect along the diagonal. What was rows are now columns and vice versa. Where does it send x prime? Yeah.
Does it send it back to the original basis?
It sends it back because x prime times x prime, they are unit vector, they have the same length, x times x prime, give you 1. What about x prime and y prime? They are orthogonal to each other, their dot product is 0. So this is just x without the prime, and the same goes for the y. So it's, what does it implies geometrically? It does the rotation, but now in the inverse direction, clockwise instead of counterclockwise. That is, the transpose of R is also the inverse of R, which is just the transformation that send you back to wherever you went from. Okay, and you have all this discussion over here. Beautiful, once again. Okay, let's talk a bit about restoring one image. We can define, in this case, what would be local operations that look at each pixel as an animal by itself and doesn't. The operations that we are doing doesn't care about what happens in other pixels. For example, make every pixel brighter uniformly on the whole image. There is no sensitivity of region here, region there. I don't care about the environment of the pixel. So that would be pixels operation. Or rotation operation, also pixels to pixels. Or smoothing will not be pixel to pixel, because the smoothing that we'll get to in much later part of the course, the smoothing is obtained by replacing every pixel with its average with nearby pixels. I see few of you that know about Gaussians, I'm sure much more than me, but you can say it's just average of every pixel with its neighbors, or its convolution with a more elegant function, like a Gaussian that have some advantages, that just tells you how much weight every pixel gives to its own and to its neighbors. Stuff that we'll use when we want to apply it for high dynamic range images. Okay, so you can think about pixels as samples of image function, and we can go on and on about the philosophy about what is a pixel. Is a pixel a point? Is a pixel is a region? The book is very much pushing the philosophical idea that every pixel is just a sample of a process that is changing dynamically. Okay, so I took a camera, I just sample points from the world. And why does this sampling why thinking about sampling is so important? Because there is a lot of theory that goes with sampling, and it tells you when can you get reliable images and when should you expect artifacts. And you see plenty of artifacts like aliasing. They are basically very much related to you are not sampling enough or sampling in the wrong way, and very much related to Shannon theorem that tells you you need some minimum frequency if you, with a lot of further verbal, if you can reconstruct the image properly. But we'll wait for it. Anyhow, remember pixels, sometimes it's a square, something with area. Sometimes it's a point that is sampled from this square, maybe the middle of the square. Okay, and the images are both sampled from continuous domain, and I don't want to go too much into it, or discrete points given from it. That is, you have the scene, and from it you created the digital image by sampling, and now you're trying to create an image and want to avoid artifacts. And you'll see these issues even today. And back into very basic bugs. So there are a few principles of JavaScript that are already highlighted here. For example, that I want the image that I read to be in a one-dimensional array, and to write into the screen, I will prepare a one-dimensional array and then ask JavaScript to flash it to the screen. So but image is a two-dimensional thing. How can I access it in a one-dimensional way, in a one-dimensional array? We will assume that here are the rows of the image, all of the same length, uncompressed image, raw data. And I'll assume that in the 1D pixels, it's just raster scan 1, 2, 3, all the way, say, up to 10. And this will be the first row. Keep forgetting that's the correct row with O, right? Row versus sound the same to me. That would be row 0, here in this array are all the pixels of row 1, pixels of row 2, and so on. And if I want to access the pixels that lives in row 3 and address 7, I have to look at the address which is start at the beginning of the array, which the name of the array knows for you, and from this point jump the size of the first row, because you have to jump over 3 full rows, and then jump another 7 elements, and you're done. So that's how, and it's a bit less elegant than just writing ij, but you're getting used to it. Okay, and we want to scale image up, we size up an image. And for row goes from 0 all the way to the number of rows. From rows it goes to the number of columns, the width of the image, column plus plus, row plus plus. Index 1 is the row where in the array that I'm reading from. Index without the 1, index is where I'm going to read from, and I'm going to write, since I'm doubling the array by, say, k equal 4, I'll write it into pixel 4 times the width. The width is because I have to jump over each width, and it's assumed now that every pixel is only 1 byte. Normally, in your homework, every pixel would be either 3 or 4, depending if you have alpha or not. And if it will be Heidi, then every pixels will be actually 6 bytes or 8 bytes again, depending if you have alpha, because each pixel will be 2 bytes. Anyhow, and copy from the input image into the output image. You also see here that example of using the new command that assumes that it's static array, so you want to know the size. Okay, and that's of course a way to resize the image, and not sometimes we want to scale the image down. Maybe that was the source of the image, and here is the image after. Actually, I already went through this piece of the course, but to remind you. And what's the problem here? That we did not assign values to the huge majority of the pixels. So most values are the default one, never got any value to assign. Which reminds me very, what if we do want in JavaScript to write with input output, say for rotation, resizing, what you need to do in homework 1, it's very tempting to first write the image to the canvas, then we write the image, flash it to the canvas, and then ask at pixels ij what is the value of the canvas at this point. Very tempting, and you might find in your JavaScript source the operation that sounds like get pixels or get pixels value, because you have write pixels value, so it makes sense that there will be. Somebody wants to take it? Do you know where it's going? It's not exactly about graphics, and it's an interesting explanation. What happened with this command of get value of a pixel? Again, pixels that is on the screen, pixels that is written with.
The intensity RGB value or something?
Yeah, I want to read it from the canvas. And it's, if you check your textbook, it's quite likely that there is a chance that you find this command in the textbook. Nobody knows?
Are you
you
It's-
asking what pixel or what is the
I'm saying that if you try to read a pixel from the command, you will get some garbage or an error message.
There's an issue with the function, not with the algorithm we're trying to do.
No,
No.
it's completely no. So it used to be possible, and hackers were happy to use it to see if maybe your signature or your bank account appears just nearby, and you can actually make the window transparent so you wouldn't even notice that your window hide your bank account window out there by mistake, and then read what you have underneath it on the window. So all browsers, at least that I know of, stop supporting it. So you cannot. The sad news for homework 1 and so on. You can have your own array and take this array and flash it to the screen, or look at this array and copy values from one array to another. But once you flash it to the canvas, to the screen, it's out of your control. You cannot read it. Okay. So we already discussed what's the problem with this. How do we fix it? That's the original code.
Do you just fill the blank with the same color?
That's an option. It will be a bit grainy, but you can do it. It's not necessarily efficient to fill every color. I mean, here it fits. It's a very friendly example because pixels just fit nicely. It's 4 is exactly 4 times. If I'm resizing it from 2 to 3, then we start. Yeah.
I think this is where we would apply the reverse inverse transformation, then using colors.
Exactly. Right. So instead, my main loop runs from all the outside pixels, 4 times height and 4 times the width, times on all the ij, and I still read from input and index 2, output and index 2, but how now I used the I and j of the column of the larger image and do the reverse transformation, divide by k instead of multiply by k. Okay, that's how I make sure that no pixels would be left. So just an example, just to flash a bit JavaScript for you. People ask me if for homework 1 you can use a math.js or GL matrices.js libraries that do matrix multiplication for you. Yes, and you're strongly encouraged to do it. I'm going to show you, actually, I'm going to show you all the math of homework 1. So to save some headache there and just implement these matrices if you want. And, yeah, if you just take a value and multiply it 4 times, or even do the reverse transformation, then you're getting into a very grainy part, which call for anti-aliasing, especially. Okay, so let's talk about the problem that I want us to work on in homework 1. So I have the empty target image. Here is its center, and it has some number of rows, some number of columns over there, and it can be part of the input or not. I don't remember if it's in the specification of the homework, but you might as well assume that it's any number you have in mind. And it doesn't necessarily need to make sense, and it doesn't have to be the same values. So here is my target image that has 13 rows and 6 columns. And right now my target image is empty. and I want to, and in addition, you're giving the source image that consists, it's hard to see, of rows that are in red, a blue row, red row, blue row, red row, and so on. You see it again, larger over here. What is the input image? In your case, it would be to start with a bunny.py. And I want a transformation that will take the source image and do a linear transformation and stretch it. So I'll basically restart. I want a transformation that will take all the empty pixels. That is, I'll have a loop or ask my GPUs to work on all the pixels as points. Now I'm thinking about the pixels as point in the empty target image. And I'll find some transformation that will take me into the target image. Along the way, it will scale to fit. It might rotate, because you also have rotation either for bonus or if you're grad mandatory. Place the pixels, and now I'm going to read for every pixel what is written underneath it. And I wanted to walk with you on the math to show you how to do it slowly. Okay, so I want to compute a transformation that A will do it and B will do it, even if I am applying some rotation of the image. Remember, I'm always running on the empty pixels of the target image, and for every target empty pixels, I need a way to look at the corresponding place, the correct place. It's a source. So what you see here are the source image, and you see the pixels from here just translated and zoomed so they all fit nicely. And then for each one, say I took this one and I map it over here. It's easier if I have Q is one of these pixels that I'm asking about. Let's say if the transformation is, if I don't rotate, if Q is somewhere on the top line, then what I'm doing is a sequence of actually queries for every pixel here. Let's calculate the location of the image pixels in the source image and find where it is. And the answer can be a single pixel, or if you want to go fancy, the answer can be a linear interpolation of the nearby pixels which handle aliasing parts, reducing this staircase wise. You get some bonus point if you're doing it. So without translation, it's not hard to do it without this matrix headache, but let's do it the proper way and then introduce everything. So I remind you, we are working with the IJ in homogeneous coordinate, which means that the target translation could be written as, refresh everybody's memory, this matrix alpha beta times x, y, 1, what does it do? It's translated by x, y goes to x plus alpha, y plus beta. Okay, so when I'm in such an apotropos, arrogant way, talking about the correct way to work on it, I suggest to work with a canonical volume in 3D, which is a cube whose corners are, how to see, -1, -1, 1, 1. I'll move it in a second. So -1, -1, 1, 1, and I'll map everything, and I'll do all the math over here, and then use a reverse transformation. Show how it is. But I'll first map everything into this canonical volume of And it's a good habit because your GPU expects you to have all the same happens in this type of canonical value, not necessarily for this whole. So how can I find a transformation from all the pixels at the empty target image, every location? And by the way, won't be aware of bugs that I is not X. Right? I is a Y, it's going upward, not downward, and J is what becomes the X. So the I and J switch. So I need a transformation that will take this whole empty target image and map it together with all its constant into the canonical -1, -1 to 1, 1. This canonical volume over here. And I want to find a linear transformation, so something that will do all the way up to the start again, start from the target and the target image and move it so that, notice what happened to the center of the target image. Center of the target image should obviously land up at 0, 0. Just the middle of the image. That is, the target has the same number of rows and columns from each side. So, first transformation that I'm going to apply is translate this image as we move, translate this image is to translate this image, but don't worry about its size. Just translate it with the same size. Using this, what would be the translation? So it's only the rightmost column in homogeneous coordinates is interesting. That remains 1, 1, 0, 0. And by how much do I move it? I move it by number of the x coordinate should move by the number of pixels, number of columns, divided by 2. And same goes for the number of rows. And there is always a little headache because the center of the pixel is not actually at 0, 0, is at half, half, which is, check it out, to move the center to the center, you need to add the -1 over, is -half over there to correct it. Otherwise, you are off by half a pixel. Not a big deal, and don't worry about it until everything else is working properly. Okay, so this transformation, everybody agrees, takes all the pixels from here. Again, what I'm trying to create is just a single matrix that takes the coordinates of a point here and the coordinate of a point here that I want to fill, map it to coordinates in the target, probe what is this target, and then the copy over here. So I'm just generating a very long way to end up with one single matrix that will be product of a lot. So, and I recycle the joke with a mathematician many times. It's going to be a sequence of a lot of matrices. But luckily for you, GS math has multiply with as many arguments math as you want, and will do the job for you. Just feed it with the right matrices. Okay, everybody is happy with this translation? Understand why it's a number of pixels, the number of columns in the target half, and number of rows in the target half. So the center will go to 0, 0. Next, I'm going to scale it to 3 in homogeneous coordinates of x, y, 1 will scale this by the x coordinate by 2, the y coordinate by 3, and doesn't touch the other 6. So I'm in the scenario where here is my desired canonical volume, that's 1 by 1. And I have I took the empty image, placed it over here, but it's way too large. It's not 1 by 1. And I don't worry about aspect ratio right now. If you decided that your aspect ratio doesn't fit well, then your image will be stretched. That's based on, you cannot do better than this. You can assume that if you have to, that you will not use the whole screen, there are other solutions. Here, I don't worry about it. What you asked for, that's what you're getting. You told me that I'm taking 10 by 10 into 20 by 10. Don't expect the image, the aspect ratio to stay the same.
So the smaller image that's supposed to be from -1 to 1, does it still have the same number of pixels as the empty target image, or does it have like less pixels? Like,
I think about it as continuous, but then I think about it as continuous set of points, and then what becomes pixel with ij will be points there, but at each point I'll take a coordinate of a pixel that is empty, go to the 1, 1, and either look at what's happening in the 1, 1, or get the inverse transformation that will map me into some point. Over there, either way is fine. Okay, next comes scaling by, again, 2 divided by nx over the target. Why by this number? Think about it. Well, I want a length of nx, length of 13 columns to be squeezed into length of 1, so I need to divide by 13. But it's not to the width of 1, it's to the width of 2, because it's from -1 to 1, so it's 2 divided by 13. And same goes for the y. Okay, so now everything lies over here at the 1, 1, and you can, by the way, see the pixels much smaller. And in GeoGebra, it's very easy because you're just saying apply matrix on set of points, and it just appeared. So that took care of mapping linearly the target image into the canonical volume. If you're only doing scaling, then you are kind of close to the end. At this point, you are basically saying, here are similar matrices now for the target. That would be, sorry, for the source. I'm always confusing. I'm starting from the target and then talking about the source. Right, so confusing. Similar matrices, possibly different number of pixels for the source. Doesn't have to be the same number of pixels. Possibly dynamically, here are my image. And I apply the very same transformation. Now everything is in the 1, 1. And here on the right screen, you see -1, -1 to 1, 1, just zoomed out. Okay, so everything is happening here, including the whole image, and then I can solve it. If you're only in the problem of scaling from one image to another. If you to mention very quickly one possible way to do an anti-aliasing, for center of pixels of the source image, the bunny, but I give you as the bunny, the Stanford bunny. And it happens that one of your pixels here happens to lie just next to S4. So probably it's fine if you just take the color of S4 and that's it. In homework 1, you can just say, as long as I'm in the integer of S4 in the overall pixel, then I'll copy it. No problems. But if you want to become a bit more fancy, you can say, hey, if S4 if P, this pixel after the transformation, P lies inside this square, then I can do bilinear interpolation, which will work by let me start from an easier case. Let's say that P lies on the segment between S2 and S4, then how should I merge the colors between S2 and S4? I'll do linear interpolation between these two values. The same I'll do if P prime is between S1 and S3, just the linear interpolation of these two values. And we'll talk much more on interpolation. It's topics that we'll repeat a few times. If P double prime is somewhere in between, what should I do? You can make it quicker, but a systematic solution would say, go all the way to the left to this segment, estimate what is the color here on the segment between S1 and S2, and just linearly interpolate between the two of them. The same goes to linearly interpolate between S2 and S4. And now you know what is the value at P prime and at P, and finally at P double prime, just do linear interpolation of these two values. So that's called bilinear interpolation. And you can make it a bit quicker. And then you'll have a very smooth transaction between different pixels. It would not look so staircasey. Okay, next. What should I do with the rotation? So I have the rotation matrix. And now all my pixels start to rotate. And the rotation matrix, I don't have it here. The rotation matrix is the same one that we discussed earlier. Cosine minus sine, sine minus cosine. No part. But notice that here I'm rotating the template. Here I'm rotating the template counterclockwise, which would mean that in the final image, the rotation would be clockwise. So if the question asks rotate clockwise, if the question asks about rotate clockwise, then in this trick that we're doing, you have to rotate with opposite direction. But now I run into another problem, that when I rotate the 1, 1 into there are pixels that falls outside the image. The question asks you for bonus to shrink and enlarge it as you are rotating. So all my pixels are all falling inside the target image, or falling inside the target image over here, the same thing, just enlarged. But how can I do it? Play a bit with the math. Maybe there is a simpler formula, but it works for me. You are doing after the rotation, you are doing another scaling, this time the same way for the x and the y. And the scaling would be with a matrix B, B1. What is B? 1 over square root cosine of 45 minus theta, here it is just theta, and 90. So let's break down. This mod theta minus 90, just this operation, the mode operation. If you haven't seen it in this context, just said if you have 93, then after the mode, you're just getting 3. Just reduce the number. So it doesn't mind that you'll have float values. Over here, it just guarantees that it will be between 0 and 90. Okay, and that explained because rotation is just periodically every 90 directions. Now, to express a bit or to highlight what's going on there, let's start at the theta rotation. What from the center all the way to the corner, remember it's 1 by 1. What is the length from here, the center to here? Square root 2. And to which x coordinate do I want this point to fall into? To x equal 1. So at least sanity check, if I scale it by square root of cosine of remember, this angle right now is 45 because I didn't rotate anything. That's where the corner. So it's cosine of 45 minus 0, which gives me 45, which is cosine, which just gives me 1. Okay, and check it out. That's work all the way as you rotate it all the way by 90 degrees, and when you're passing the 90 degrees, it's just repeat. Okay, so now we are familiar with all the matrices. Let's see what is the final matrix that I'm generating out of them. So what did I do? I take a point Q, I translate it first by the target, the translation that the target defines, the one that I animated, that is the one that uses these matrices, because Q is a value from the source, but it's a value from the target, a pixel that I'm trying to fill. So applying the translation and rotation, now Q lives in the canonical value, -1, -1, 1, 1. Rotate, cosine, sine, sine. Cosine minus sine, sine. That's a standard rotation. If you want all your pixels to be in the image, then use my notation scale 3. Scale 3 is just this matrix. And now you can either put also the other image on -1, -1, or, and I think that it's easier, now apply a transformation that takes you back from the -1, -1 into the target image. How do I do it? Well, I had one transformation that took me from the source image into -1, -1. These are the scale source and the translation of the source, right? So if I'll add the -1, the inverse, it just takes me the way back, from here back to here. The translation of the source, and voila, that's all I did. Just pulling up things from the stack. So it looks tedious, but at the end of the day, it's one matrix. And I think that in terms of compute effort to program it, will save potential bugs, because each step is quite clear what you're doing, and running time, you don't pay anything, just one matrix at the end. So yeah, that would be my recommendation for homework 2. Okay, moving along. Yeah. There's slides to explain it. And you will have link to the GeoGebra and everything is there. Rotation in 3D. We are approaching the 3-dimensional world. And I'll have to do from time to time, I'll give you a vector, and I want to do, if I'm watching in this direction, I want to rotate the world around me. It's flight simulator, and I'm doing pitching and rolling in this direction. And let's see how we compute transformation for it. Here is the wrong way to compute transformation from it, but let's get familiar with this. Possibly, I want to rotate the world only around the x-axis, only around the z-axis, that is, what's happening in this transformation. Every point that leaves n in the 3 world, here is the z-axis, and I'm going to rotate around the z-axis. In particular, the xy plane stays on the xy plane, doesn't gain or lose any height, any z value. So that's our familiar transformation, cosine minus sine, sine cosine, 1, 1, 1, all the way to z. We just, before that we called it rotate around the origin, now we called it rotate around the z-axis, because we are in 3D world. Rotate around the x-axis, now the x needs to be fixed, the rotation is out there. And prepare yourself to be confused or to get bugs about rotation will work fine, except that it will work in the opposite direction than what you want, which depends on whether you were aware that it's right hand coordinate system, which we'll talk about later. But anyhow, those are the three matrices that you can define. And now if I want to rotate around the line, so I want to define rotation around this line, then I can express it as first rotate by some amount until it's in the xy plane, calculate this angle, because you didn't have it as one of the origin, rotate it, so now it's rotated about the, say, x-axis, rotate here, and do the opposite on the way back. That's a way. Sometimes it's fine, probably, most cases not. So to this, we want to apply this rotation because we want to do pant, tilt, and roll. Which I'll never remember which is which, but I'll try. Okay, so using the XYZ to describe the rotation, that's called Euler coordinates. And that's where we'll get back later in the course to, hey, sometimes it doesn't work because of this gimbal lock. And interpolate, I mean, it's fine to represent every rotation with them, but weird things might happen if you are trying to interpolate or move from one angle to a tiny little rotation just next to it. Okay, but we already established a better method to rotate about any axis. We just want to change the coordinate space we are talking about using some orthogonal matrix. Orthogonal matrix, every row is orthogonal to every other row. And orthogonal will mean that the bases that you are spanning have unit length, that the vector has unit length of 1. And it will work really nicely in the scenario of homework 2. Okay, so how can I create this rotational matrix? More example and more explanation coming, don't panic yet, but essentially all we want to say, you have one base, UVW. Why? Because that's where the camera look at, and that's what the pilot in the camera think as his or her right side and upper side. That's a UVW, and you still want to do the roll operation of the camera, then just apply the rotational matrix by representing what are these UVW in our favorite XYZ plane, and that's a matrix that you need. That will do the rotation for you. That's kind of a miracle that if you've never, will take a while until you understand. Orthogonal vectors, what do we want? The product of every vector by itself is 1, and the product of every vector by another 1 is 0. They are orthogonal to each other. Write the three of them as 3 rows. Let's try to get to, I'll skip a bit to get to something a bit more exciting. We'll get back to it, but yeah, I don't think that in coolness so far the class today was too high. Right? Okay. We'll know what is a vector. We'll have to talk about matrix multiplication. That's homework 2. Balls and billboard. Ball sphere, you know what it is, by the way, that's a result of homework 4 because you have shading here. There is the sun, but the input would be a JSON file. And in the JSON file, I'll tell you about spheres by specifying the center and the color and the radius, of course. And I'll tell you about billboard, that I'll tell you, hey, here is a file that you can put as an image if you want to replace a file by the image by another image that you like most, as long as it doesn't get me into any troubles. Please go ahead and do it. You put your images. But where do I place the billboard? billboard, like a sign on the road, will always be rectangle, but there is no guarantee that its normal will point in any specific direction. It can be tilted. It can be curved. It cannot be trapezoidal that is not a rectangle, just because I wouldn't give it. Guarantee that the input will be there. Normal, and how do I tell you about it? In the JSON file, I'll say a billboard comes, and here are 3 coordinates of this billboard. So far the input of this homework is a set of billboards, with images that you can place on them if you want, and a set of spheres, each one with radius and colors. And what else do I need to tell you? I need to tell you where is a camera, what's a camera parameter. It's not only where is the camera, I need to give you a few more camera parameters, and what you are giving me in return is the image of what the camera sees from the world at this point. And which you can do very easily in any normal graphics language, OpenGL for sure, by just pushing every billboard as a triangle with texture on it, which we'll do on homework 5. But homework 3 and 4, unfortunately, homework 2 and 3, unfortunately, you need to do it by shooting rays through each and every pixel, which will take a bit math of understanding how do I generate a ray, and how do I find if a ray hits one of the objects. And then I can see, hey, this ray coming from I just hit the red sofa just next to Homer, so the pixels that generated this ray will be painted, will be rendered red exactly in the color of the sofa. And on the other hand, another pixel, another ray that corresponds to another pixel didn't hit any of the billboards. There are 2 billboards here, each one. They are both flats and rectangles, but with different directions toward you. And if your ray doesn't hit any of the billboards, then you decide about some default colors that you have to return. Okay, and it will not run very fast. You can make videos out of it, but it will take a while. It's move. So here a set of billboards, some background billboard of the sun, and so on. Recycle them a bit more. And as I said, videos of this part are really cool. For example, very short one that's just I moved the camera, I asked to move the camera a bit and keep it about all fixed. And why am I so obsessed about billboards are because they are so useful. They are used in every graphical scene because to denote something that you don't want to keep in 3D. For a while, there is a 3D scene, but for a while, when the player moves not by huge amount, this doesn't change a bit, and mostly there are no mutual reflection between one mountain to another, or one obstacle to another that would hint that something is lying over there. If there are no such mutual reflection when you move from here to here, the image looks the same, then there is no reason not to place it just as a 2D image and save tons and tons of time. Generated. And of course, usually it's not one billboard, it will be quite a few billboards, and they can intersect with each other. And as we discussed last times, the billboard doesn't have to be rectangle. I mean, I'll still give it to you as rectangle or as triangle, but if you want to see what happens behind the mountain, just declare that all the pixels in the sky are transparent. So a ray that hits a billboard, but hit a pixel, and we'll have to figure out the math. How do I know at which pixel of the image my ray hits? I know where it generated from the camera, but now I figure out that it hit this billboard. I need to find what pixel of the billboard, what its RGB value, and if this pixel turns out to be transparent, then I'll keep on with my ray, hoping to find another obstacle that it will hit at the end. Okay, we discussed it, yeah, more and more about where we use the billboard. Google for environmental maps for example, and so on. And we need a bunch of math to do it, so we'll have to talk about a cross product. Let me just tell you what the other thing that I'll give you with the camera. So what we are not, we can do object-oriented rastering. That is, for each object, project it onto the screen. That's what your GPU is doing. It's usually faster, it's less annoyed by obstruction between the obstacles, but it captures less greatly mutual reflection from one object to the other. What we are going to do is for every pixel of the image that we are creating, and for every object, is this object affect this pixel? Slow. It can parallelize pieces of it, but you're replacing slow with less slow. But still slow. Okay, I shooting a bunch of rays, canonical parts, and so on. I just promise to you to tell you what the other camera parameters. Yeah. So I need to tell you what are the other camera parameters. So I need to tell you where is the camera in the JSON file. You'll have the XYZ, and you'll have a vector that is called look at. And actually, I found out in my homework that I like it much more that the look at is a point in the scene rather than a vector. And why do I think that it's better is, and it's different than the textbook, is that because if you're generating animation and I keep looking at your bag while I'm moving, I don't need to change what I'm looking at. It's still my focus at the same point, so it's better to do it this way. So you have these two vectors, and you have the location of the eye, you have the location or a point that you are looking at, and I have another very confusing vector that will be given called the up vector. The up vector. And it's very tempting to think that the up vector is vertically up, but it's absolutely not. Because I can have the up vector pointing vertically up and now doing tilt option, moving my head up and down, and I don't need to change the up vector. And the up vector is not unique. It's the same up vector. The point that I'm looking at will be changed. The up vector will be the same. The up doesn't have to be orthogonal to any other vectors, more or less. Okay, so tilt will not affect the up vector. You can stick with the same up. Roll will change, and pan will not change. Only roll will change the up vector. If I'm doing a roll during my flight simulator, turning up and down, that's definitely where the up vector, instead of pointing up, pointing to the side. And I'll just give you the up vector as part of the JSON file. And if you want to show the effect to create a video where you're doing the roll, just change the direction of the up vector. Quite easy. Now, from this input, I'm going to build the camera's own coordinate system. I need to give you, for the camera, that it has one direction, W, what we usually think about the X. Surprisingly, it's going backward, not to what you're looking at, but to the back of what you're looking at. Opposite to, here is the direction you're looking at the opposite. Using these vectors, you'll create what is your right hand, the vector U over here. What the camera thinks that it's right hand direction. Nothing to do with necessarily with the X, Y, Z, but from the camera local parameters, that would be the X coordinate. The W would be the Z, what are we missing? The Y coordinate that points up, except that we don't call it Y, we call it V. It will go upward. And then we're creating these three vectors, and from now on, once we have these three vectors, an X, Y, Z coordinates, that's a rotation matrix that we need for everything else. Perfect, see you Wednesday. Any request, hopes, star examples that you want me to go through just say, I'll be happy to. Well,
Can I get the link to the GeoGebra exercise we just saw?
I believe you have it.
This.
You have them, let's see. So you're asking if you're going to the course website, I believe.
Yeah, I can open it. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, it's right here. Is it?
Yes, so go to the lectures, to syllabus, click.
Here?
Yeah.
This one? Good,
Yeah. And hopefully, and now if you click on it, I'm very happy that you show interest.
Oh,
It's like it's tons of work, and and if you get to GeoGebra,
yeah, this one. I think this example. This
yes,
example.
yeah. So go down, and there was a link. Will be.
This one. Good.
What are you asking?
I was asking for the GeoGebra link for the, the transformation.
Oh, the GeoGebra.
The complex example.
Yeah. It should be here.
Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry, I think.
Yeah, essentially all the math is zero. And so,
Okay, sure.
did it work for you?
No, I don't think it's still allowed. I just refreshed it.
Wait,
Yeah, it's supposed to be here. Is it there?
Yeah, I don't see it on this one.
Yeah.
Maybe this one I just like. If you go to this one, it's the third slide. Maybe this one I inserted just before the lecture.
Yeah, this one I have it.
Okay, so it's just this one. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I'll upload it.
Sure. Thank you so much.
I have a quick question about hw1. So can we assume that the file will always be in PPM format, or do we also have to support other file size?
You can assume it's PPM.
PPM, okay.
Yeah, it's just warm up.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And you have the templates. You got the template from GitHub of how to read PPM, write PPM.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.